So that was your basic lesson on panning. Now we're going to work on taking that to the next level and being a little bit more efficient at it. And you're going to see this efficiency grow progressively as we add more and more tools to our arsenal. Of course, we're also going to start to invest a little bit more money in it and spend a little bit more time on it, but we'll be able to process a whole lot more dirt and therefore find a whole lot more gold. To start with, one of the first investments, if you're going to use a pan very often, is one of these. This is a 1/4 inch screen. You notice at the end of that video how we had to pull out all the rocks. Well, this will make sure the rocks are pulled out before we ever get to the panning stage. And that'll make panning a whole lot faster and a whole lot easier. This costs about $20 or so, $15, $20 depending where you buy it. So it's a little bit expensive. You can build one yourself, but the nice thing about this is it'll fit in top of a 5-gallon bucket, so that when you go dump dirt in a 5-gallon bucket full of water, you can just shake it around, and when you're done, you'll have a bucket full of classified dirt. This is called a classifying screen, and it's 1/4 inch. Sometimes they're called grizzlies, but that's usually for slightly larger screens, and we'll get to that a little bit later too. Right now, there's a promising spot down the middle of this river. It's got some dirt down there. And we're going to dump this under the water. Some water in it. Set it up on top of this rock so it won't float away. And then use this scoop, which I bought at the dollar store. These are really handy scoops because they're kind of narrow on one end, and then they get a little bit larger down at the bottom. So when you scoop stuff up and put your hand over it, it kind of caps it and stays in there. Because otherwise it'll just all flow away before you get it into the pan. I picked this spot because it's deep and it's in a crevice. And crevices, because gold is so heavy, crevices usually trap gold. And so down here, we're down between 2 rocks, and we're behind another rock, so the water kind of slows down a little bit as it goes around this big rock here and tends to drop out in this general area. So now here we are, we have a nice pan full of that, and now you get it underwater, so that the pan itself is underwater. This doesn't have to be. And then you shake it back and forth like that. And this just lets all the fine stuff wash into the pan. Because while we all want to find, that big nugget the size of our fist, realistically, you're not going to find nuggets in this very often. If there many nuggets were out there like that, you'd have a lot more people hunting gold. They're out there, and they can be found, but realistically, your chances of finding a nugget like this are awfully rare. So you're going to take this pan, this classifying screen full of dirt, scrape around looking for it, and see if you see any large nuggets sitting in there, or even slightly smallish nuggets that are not small enough to go through the screen. So I don't see a large gold nugget in there, so we're going to assume there isn't one, and toss it. Obviously don't toss it someplace where you plan to work, because then you have to move it twice. But I'm not planning to work over there right now. So now we're going to do that again, and 2 or 3 times usually fills up a pan. Now gold is usually found on the bottom, because gold is heavy. And so eventually we're going to show you how to get all the gold out of the bottom of a crevice like this. Right now you're just going to scrape around in the bottom and try to scoop as much up into your scoop as you can, and then dump that in your pan. I'm pretty much on the bottom of this crevice, so if there's gold down there, we should have a pretty good amount in this pan. Quite a bit more than we had last time. And obviously, as I said before, there are easier ways of doing this. And you'll learn those as we go along. But just get into it one step at a time, just like I did, so you can easily see what you're doing. This is the best way. Alright, I know I've got a pan pretty full of probably some pretty good dirt. So now we're going to go back to our rock, we're going to pan it out. So we'll take a pan, and this time because we have a lot more dirt in it, we're going to settle it flat. Just like before, we're going to shake it around as much as we can for at least 15 or 20 seconds before we start moving it. You need to make sure you have water on top of the dirt, because if you don't have too much water, this is what happens. See, that top is not really liquid, it's kind of bouncing on top of there. And you've got to have enough water to make the whole thing move back and forth very smoothly in order for the gold to settle. So you need to be underwater, or at least have the pan full of water while you're doing this. And the advantage of doing it underwater like this is that it's a lot less weight, and doing this all day will get tiring on those shoulders. Alright, so right now, any gold that's of any size at all, I'm talking even tiny specks, will either be on the bottom of this pan or within like a 1/4 inch of it, so there won't be any significant gold on top of here. So now we're going to gently settle it and change our angle a little bit so that the gold that might have been in this corner is going to start working its way towards the middle and the bottom so that we can wash our gold out. Set it like this. And now, really big washout. You can get a bunch of stuff out here because I guarantee you will not have gold on top of this pan. It's all going to be in the bottom. 3 big washes. And see right there we cut about half of our dirt out of here. Shake it again. And again, 3 good washes off the top. Notice how I'm dropping it under the water, picking it up and pulling it back and just letting the weight of the water pull the dirt off the top. You never want to shake while you're pulling it out because if you shake it, then the gold could slide out with the rest of everything else. And at this point, there's a lot less dirt in here. And so it's a lot easier on the hands to pull around. But this way I can process a pan a lot faster than most people because I believe in physics. And physics says gold is 5 times heavier. Gold will wind up in the bottom if you do it this way. So I don't have to worry about the stuff on the top. You're not going to lose a significant amount of gold doing what I just now did, if it's well settled before you start. At this point, notice how the dirt is under the water, and the edge of the pan is under the water. That makes the dirt weigh a lot less because the water offsets the weight of the dirt. And so this hand is basically doing nothing. It's just sort of setting here as an anchor point, and I just usually shake it back and forth really quickly with this hand. It takes almost no effort at all. So now it's settled. I'm going to wash, 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 settle. Wash back a little bit. Each time you go back, you want to wash back anything that may have worked its way out to the edge here so it falls back in. Settle it down, and then wash, wash, wash. And then as you push it back under the water, the force of the water flowing back will wash that off again. Shake, wash, wash, wash. And you can start keeping an eye out for gold at this point. You're not likely to see any here if you've done it right. Gold should still be very close to the bottom of this pan. But if you haven't panned it quite right at this point, you'll want to watch it. So now we're going to rotate it down to the bottom like we did last time. And just start washing what's left. There are a few specks of gold in there, but not like I'd hoped. Now that can happen for a variety of reasons. One, somebody else worked that hole before I did, because it should have been a hole that had some gold in it. Could have been it got washed out, or whatever reason gold didn't settle there. Sometimes currents can do weird things. But we got 2 good specks of gold. Not enough to really be worth much, but a little bit of gold, so we know we are digging and finding some gold. So using this vial works really well for a start. You can buy a vial and a gold pan and go out and try your luck at the local river. However, once you get a little bit better at it, you're going to need to upgrade from the vial. So if you got a pan that's actually got a fair amount of good gold in it, like this one does, you're going to get down in here, and you see probably 20 small flakes down in here. So here you can see we've got probably 20 small flakes in there in and around this black sand. We haven't completely isolated them yet. But taking each one of these flakes, picking it up with your fingertip, and dropping it in the vial is tedious. Now it sounds like fun at first, but after a while it gets to be very tedious if you start finding enough gold to actually make it worth your while. That's when you upgrade to a snifter bottle. This is a snifter bottle here. Any gold bearing area is going to have a mining shop around someplace, and any one of those is going to have snifter bottles like this. They cost about $3 and they're well worth the investment. You put some water in them first, and squeeze the water out. Find a spot where you have your gold, and just go right over it and let go, and it sucks up the gold piece. It'll even suck up pretty large flakes through here. Obviously not nuggets, but those you can just pick out of your hand. When it gets to be bigger than a flake and it won't fit up into here, and you can pick up with your fingers, they call those pickers. It's somewhere between a nugget and a flake. So, what we do here is we just isolate this gold by washing it around until only the gold is sitting up there. And then, making sure it's underwater, squeeze your snifter bottle out and pick up the gold. Now you can pick up the gold and the black sand at the same time, but you'll still have to separate the black sand and the gold out at some point. So if you're going to pan it, you might as well do it right then, unless you have a blue bowl, which we'll get to a little later when we talk about the more advanced parts of gold processing. Meanwhile, in this same pan, you can see we picked up a little bit of mercury. So this is a mercury flake here. What it is it's a piece of gold that at some point in the past came in contact with mercury, and the mercury grabbed onto it, wrapped around it, and so it's completely covered by mercury. Now if you put this in your vial, it will grab onto all your other gold flakes and turn all of them into a mercury-covered flake. Mercury has a really nasty habit of grabbing onto gold and just sticking to it. And nothing you can do will get it off except for boiling it in nitric acid. We'll talk about that in another video. Meanwhile, when you're out here in the field, if you don't want all your gold to wind up looking shiny silver, you need to take your gold and have 2 different vials or 2 different snifter bottles. I have a large snifter and a small snifter. And I put my gold in one, and anything I can see has silver on it, the mercury covered ones, in another one. That way, I don't wind up contaminating my pretty gold, so I can keep it nice in my vial. Now, you don't have to do that. As I'll explain later, you can clean the mercury off, but it's a little bit of a tedious process and a little bit dangerous if you don't have the right tools. And so, it's best to keep them separate if you can. And you still have your gold, it'll just be in a different vial. The other thing you can do is if you're working all day and you don't want to have to separate all your gold out at once in the creek, you can take your snifter bottle and just, at this point, maybe pan a little bit more out of here till you just have black sand left, go through and just suck up all the black sand, just like this. Just suck it all up until you get your bottle full, and then keep working. Because the more time you can spend in the creek working on finding gold, and the less time you can spend on processing up these little details, you can do that at home later in the evenings or on the weekend whenever you have time. This way, you spend more time actually pulling the gold out of the creek, and you can always separate it out later once you have it in your garage someplace. So, that's the basics of panning for right now, and with that information you should be able to go out and have good fun for quite a little while before you start moving on to the finding more gold and needing better tools.